Hello and welcome to the show. Today's Forza 6 challenge was all about tyre strategy and tyre conservation as we went racing with some C-Class cars fitted with drag tyres. Now the drag tyres themselves don't make the cars handle that much differently. They don't suddenly become awfully hard cars to drive, they're just a tad bit more understeery. But what they do is wear very, very quickly. Now the races that we set up here were designed to push the limits. The races were designed to be about 10-12-ish minutes long, which meant maybe, if you were careful, you could just about get away without making a pit stop, or if you had a well-built car, you could just about get away without having to come into the pits. But if you left it too late, your tyres would be dead, your car would be undrivable, so you kind of had to play things very, very carefully, and especially if you got stuck in battles, you could kill your tyres very, very quickly. If you were up the front on your own, you could get away with driving a little bit more cautiously, save some tyres. In a group like this, it is quite hard to be worrying about conserving tyres, because, well, yeah, you're all racing really rather close. I mean, this is 3 wide almost, coming up towards the first turn here at Lime Rock. The Clio just lacks that little bit of straight line speed. The Mustang gets past. The Capri actually pretty damn quick in a straight line. That thing could keep ahead of this lot of vehicles. And you can see that the field was incredibly bunched up. It was all incredibly close. On this opening lap, an Alpha's trying to have a look around the outside of the Clio. It's not going to work. There's another Alpha and Corvette. We're going side by side further back. Yeah, the opening lap of this race was really rather frantic. I had gone for a Ferrari Dino for this. Now, one of the rules for this race is that the cars had to weigh 2,000 pounds or more. Reason being is that we've tended to find that the lighter the car, the better the tyre wear. And to keep a decent variety of vehicles, decided that 2,000 pounds was going to be a minimum weight, so just we could have sort of interesting amount of cars. You wanted to try and keep your car as close to that 2,000 pounds as you could, though. We did also have to ban the Lancia Row 37 because that is ridiculously good on its tyres. So yeah, there is slight variations in cars in the way they deal with tyre wear. I thought the Ferrari Dino was a pretty damn good choice of vehicle. It seemed to be pretty good on its tyres. And it was decently quick around this circuit, lacked a little bit of straight line speed, and I got embroiled in battles further down the order. I got really caught up in these battles down towards the back of the pack. Ignore the lagged out Ghost Golf, it's just a funky thing that Forza replays do. Now, some of the vehicles were going to try and make this without stopping. Now, the risk that you run if you try and do this race without stopping, well, if your tyres go off with like a lap to go and you've got to try and coast around with a ruined car, it won't work. You'll lose so much time with ruined tyres. You also can't afford to get stuck in too much traffic. This was something that they were finding. I mean, you can see the leaders are well up the road from this group of cars. You had to make the most of your overtaking opportunities. You have to get past everybody as quickly as possible. Towards the front, this was the battle over second place between a Jaguar and a Ford Capri. Now, the Jaguar was a pretty damn quick car. In the early laps, he was keeping up and giving the BMW M6 that was leading the race an awful lot of trouble. Problem was the Jaguar wasn't very good on his tyres whatsoever and was coming under a little bit of pressure from the Capri. Now, with the kind of the length of the races, if you dive into the pits before the halfway stage, the chances are, especially if your car is very, very bad on tyres, if you dive into the pits too early, you're going to have to potentially even do a 2-stop race, which is not what you want to be doing at all. And the Jaguar did not want to find himself in that particular situation, so he was trying to tough it out, survive another lap, even though the tyres were quite clearly not doing so well. A bunch of cars dove into the pits this time around, but that meant that in their final stint, if you like, they were going to have to do the extra lap, whereas the Jaguar was taking his punishment. Now, it's the whole strategy game that goes on. The Clio Williams is past the Jag now, and again, he's coming under threat this time from a Mustang through this first corner. It was, a tough decision that you had to make, and you can see the Jaguar was really struggling on the tyres, although he was hoping that later on it would pay off for having better tyres towards the end of the race. Problem is, if you left it too long and your tyres went to 100%, or if they went up to kind of 80 or 90%, you would be really slow. This is what I was talking about earlier. If your tyres go, they go big time, and you just do not turn. The Escort found that out as... he left it 1 lap too long and is now playing across the grass you don't want to get the tyres to that level of wear, because the car simply will not turn, and then you will lose a monstrous amount of time. These were the cars that were trying to make it on one stop. 4 cars were attempting to do it. I was actually surprised, wasn't expecting to see so many vehicles. Certainly wasn't expecting to see a Corvette as one of the cars attempting to make it. The MX-5 Cup car ran a little bit wide through turn 1. The Corvette would move up to the second position. Up ahead of them, it was the Clio Williams, surprisingly, that was leading the way, and you can see in the background, I believe it is a Subaru BRZ that was coming with them as well. And it was the Clio Williams that was to go on to take victory. Made it through the race without having a stop. I was actually very, very surprised. Also, I should point out, this is a rear-wheel drive swap Clio Williams. Front-wheel drive cars in this challenge will not work. Front-wheel drive cars chew through their tyres. So yeah, it's a rear-wheel drive swapped Williams would make it through the race without having to have a pit stop, which I was quite surprised about the number of vehicles. These guys were still fighting over that second place, and by now none of these cars had particularly healthy tyres by the end of the race. And you can see in the background there, 5th place, the BMW M6, who was the first of the cars that did pit, was catching up quite quickly as well towards the end of this race. Another lap or two, and these cars would have had to have come in. They couldn't have survived too much longer, especially not with the way they were racing together. The BRZ very nearly got the Corvette on the line. The Chevy were fighting so hard with the MX-5, was a little bit slow on that final section, and the Subaru, yeah, very nearly got him. On to race number 2. We would go to the Sonoma short layout, a track I thoroughly enjoy the circuit, a great circuit for racing out. I was expecting this one to be really hard on tyres. It isn't actually as tough on the cars as you might expect. Unfortunately, further back through turn 1, it was a little bit of chaos. A few cars ended up not pointing in the right direction. We all got going again, but yeah, it was a little bit of bumping through the first couple of corners, and then, well, it's a very common thing to have cars pushing a little bit too hard over that crest and running wide and running across the dirt here. The Nissan we follow runs a little bit wide behind. The Subaru is about to get mugged by absolutely everything. The Alpha and the BMW M6 both going either side of the BRZ. BMW gets a big slide through that particular corner. Not what you want. You don't want the car sliding around if you are trying to keep the tyres alive for as long as possible. Again, I'd not had a particularly favourable grid position. I was finding myself in all of the fighting early on, going around the outside of a Volvo. I was now having a look at the back of the Jeep. A brave choice of vehicle, and sure enough, his tyres lasted about 3 laps before they needed to go into bits. The Jeep was a quick car, as we see here. I had a big dive up the inside into the hairpin, but the Jeep was fighting back with that straight line speed. It was a quick car, but it killed its tyres far too quickly as we go through turn 1. Jeep is on the outside. That is a brave manoeuvre to try around the outside of turn 1. I give him space. I know that if we do come together, I'm going to be the one that comes off worse, as we see here. I just kind of brushed along the side of it, and it fired the Ferrari onto the outside of the corner further back there, fighting with a little bit of rallycross through there. I got lovely close-up at the back of the Jeep as we have another car, BMW, bouncing his way across the dirt. Jeep tries to get up the inside of the Corvette, can't quite do it, hits the curb, goes massively sideways. I'm forced to take avoiding action so I don't end up in the side of said spinning Jeep, and managed to round him up on the outside through the next corner, and then I was on to try and find a way past the Corvette. One of the things that you have to be aware, certainly when building a car here, it's all very well and good having an incredibly fast car, but your car needed to be good enough on the tyres. It wasn't necessarily the fastest car over the course of 1 lap that would take victory here. If your car could survive the race without having to take a stop, then you stood a good chance. So yeah, there's lots and lots of strategy all went into this. As the race progressed, of course, the field spread out a little bit more. This was the fight for 3rd place on track between the BMW and the MX-5 Cup car. BMW tried to squeeze up the inside, couldn't quite do it. I mean, this M6 was really very fast. He gets to the inside of the now the second corner, a big slide from the Beamer, but the MX-5 was out wide as well, and then that straight line speed of the BMW would put him up into that 3rd spot. And you can see kind of that the field's almost fragmented into little groups of cars. But as we saw last time out at Lime Rock, the MX-5 Cup car was again going to try and complete the race without having a pit stop. Now that was going to be tough here at Sonoma. There was quite a number of laps. You can see all the cars. I was diving into the pits with a Mustang. The BRZ was also going to try and go the whole race without stopping. That is a tall order. That is a tall order for cars around here. Now, some vehicles pitted a little bit on the early side. Again, like I said at Lime Rock, if your tyres were wearing out before half distance, some of the cars had to come in sort of a lap before the halfway mark, and that put you in trouble later on. It did give you a little bit of a boost for a while. You got out of the pit lane and you could kind of jump some of the vehicles you were racing around, and it worked for a little while. The problem was that further down the line, especially come the final lap, you were likely to be in an awful lot of trouble. As the race progressed, there was still plenty of action throughout the field between vehicles. Cars would find somebody to race with as the strategies all sort of worked themselves out. This MX-5 had a big dive up the inside into the final corner here, getting past the Galant. And again, you can see there's another pair of cars further back having a go. Capri's having a look at the inside of something else. I'm not quite sure what it was. This was the issue, though, that we saw with the cars that tried to make it without stopping. The BRZ was trying to do it, but as he came on towards this final lap, it had absolutely had it. The Volvo wasn't racing in for position. The Volvo was a lap, or just got out of the pits and was a lap down. But you see the issue. The BRZ had tried to make it on that no-stop race, but it killed his tyres. Now, admittedly, when you are on this sort of no-stop strategy, you can run the car a little bit more cautiously, and you'd be amazed how much tyre life you can save if you drive a couple of seconds a lap slower. So you could get away with it. I'm sure my Ferrari probably could have done it if I hadn't been stuck in all of the battles. The MX-5 Cup car, though, was going to take victory without having to come into the pits. Would stay at the front of the field. Just about managed to make his tyres last long enough. Not necessarily the quickest car on track, however, was good enough on his tyres so that he could make it on no stops. This was the battle for, well, what was third place would very quickly become second place between the two sort of front-running cars that had to make a stop. You see the BRZ there, his tyres were shot. It was absolutely useless in his car on this final lap. He tried to make it work. It didn't quite work for him. The Mustang here is having a look at the outside of the Alpha. I mean, you can see the MX-5 is just crossing the line now, but another lap or so and the MX-5's tyres would have been shot to hell. So, yeah, the MX-5 made the most of the strategy. You see the Subaru not making the final hairpin whatsoever. The Alpha GTV6 would go on to take second place ahead of the Mustang. I think the Subaru BRZ would eventually finish, but lost a number of places on the final lap. So only one car really made the no-stop strategy work on that on that second race. Sorry, our final race would go to the Alps circuit, the ultimate tyre killer. This track. It is very long, very, very fast corners. Cars can easily get 20% tyre wear a lap, maybe even more on some of the vehicles. And we're talking about here the small, lightweight, normal vehicles that we were racing in this event could get 20-25% tyre wear a lap. Heavier cars, yeah, you could get in a lot of trouble very, very quickly with tyre wear around here. Now, I knew my Ferrari Dino was pretty good around this circuit, but again, I was in the middle of the pack and I was in all of the fighting. I was in all of the action. I can run the car at about 10% tyre wear a lap if I drive just a little bit cautiously, but when you're in a pack of cars like this, that's not really an option. You're going to get yourself in so much trouble if you try and drive like that. You're better off just trying to kind of keep with the pack and not get involved in accidents and whatever. So yeah, I was not really thinking of going for a no-stop race around here. I think the Ferrari could maybe have done it, although admittedly you've also got to be aware that as the tyres wear, sort of as you get tyres get to 60-70%, they wear very, very quickly from that point. So doing a no-stop race here is tough. It was a 9-lap race at Alps, and doing that without a pit stop is very, very tough. So I was kind of immediately consigned to, yeah, let's just go racing with these cars. I know I'm going to have to pit. Pretty much all of the vehicles are probably going to have to pit in this race. So yeah, I had a good car as well for Alps. I was looking forward to it. The Dino was actually pretty damn fast at this circuit as I find my way past the Mustang there. And the opening laps were, the field stayed pretty bunched up for the start of this race. Now, Alps is a notoriously difficult circuit to overtake on. There is very little in the way of braking zones, especially when we're in C-Class cars here. There are small braking zones. The corners are maybe not quite flat out. A lot of sections are on this track. So actually getting overtakes done around this circuit is very, very difficult. And again, we saw how important it was to try and make your way through the field. The MX-5 gets a little bit of a slide through that corner. I mean, he's trying to make it without going for a stop again. It's made it in the first 2 races. It was trying to do it again, but he's got 2 fast cars trying to find a way past, and this is not the battling that you particularly want to have your car stuck in. The Mustang would get the move done on the MX-5, as would the Corvette as they ran down the hill. Just had that straight line speed. And as I said, while it was a tough place to overtake traditionally, the Alps, people were still having a good go at it. Volvo and an Escort were going side by side through a very, very fast section of the track there. Yeah, you just don't really brake it. A lot of this circuit is all flat out down there. It's a small dab on the brakes through this final corner. Straight line speed of your vehicles is relatively important, but as is grip, you need to be able to take the corner speed through these long, fast turns. So building a car for this particular circuit is a little bit interesting, especially with the drag tyres that make the cars that little bit more understeery. At a track like this, there's not particularly what you want when there are so many long, very long and fast corners. The Volvo was still trying to remain close. When you see the kind of the size of the gaps that we're starting to form in this field, it wasn't massive. The Volvo moving about on the curb there. You kind of often see the car ahead of you, see the car behind you, but yeah, there wasn't quite the same really close packs that we've seen at the likes of Lime Roll. This was perhaps the biggest battle going on track. It was Datsun against an Alpha Spider. My Ferrari was trying to get involved. I was making pretty good progress actually at getting through the field again. Ignore the slightly lagged out Corvette there, unfortunately. The Alpha's still having a look around the back of the Datsun. Couldn't quite do anything as we come up towards this final corner. It's another just a dab on the brakes and then you turn in. So it's very hard to have a big dive to try and get a pass done. And the Alpha does get a really good drive up the inside out of the final turn. 2 cars just slightly come together. I caught up to them massively as they tangle, but now it was time for the all-important pit stops as these cars dive into the pit lane. Again, it was very much a case of being a 9-lap race. Do you pit on lap 4 or do you pit on lap 5? How long dare you leave it? You don't want to have your tyres completely run out around this circuit because that will put you in an awful lot of trouble. But equally, if you pit too early, come the end of the race, your tyres are going to be shot. So yeah, it was a tough choice as to when you decided to come into the pits. Of course, if you do pit early as well, when you come out, you tend to be able to leapfrog the cars that pit a lap later than you, and so yeah, there was a lot of strategy in this one. As I said though, leave it too late and it's going to cost you, as this Mustang found out. He tried to follow me with the pit strategy. However, the Mustang not as good as the Dino when it comes to tyre life, and sure enough, he was really struggling. And you lose so much time the second your tyres get to 90% wear or 100% wear. You just lose so much time. It is much better to come into the pits early, although it does mean that come the end of the race, the Mustang would be on a slightly better life tyres than some of the cars that pitted a lap early. The MX-5 though, he comes flying past and was trying to make his no-stop race work as the Mustang flies into the pits. Problem is, making a no-stop race work around this track, it's very tough, and the MX-5 had to drive very slowly essentially on his laps, which meant that the cars that had come into pits, the cars that could push, could go on maximum attack, caught him without too much trouble. I think the Cup car did eventually pick up speed in these final laps to try and fight them off. You can see, sadly, my Dino, despite going very well, I'd lag out in this one. Little disappointing. Yeah, the Cup car was now trying to fight with these vehicles, but he just didn't have the tyres. He did not have the tyres to really go at it with the MX-5 that would go sweeping past. Now comes the BRZ up the inside into the first corner. Sierra is also going to get up the inside of the Cup car. Yeah, you could make the tyres last, but at this track, it really wasn't the best strategy. This track just killed the tyres far too much for it to be a really sensible strategy. And again, we saw cars that pitted a lap early, and they were struggling come the final lap. If you had a car that wasn't great on its tyres, you were often in trouble if you tried to make the stint last for 5 laps. That's when you really hurt the car. This Corvette, it was done for. It had nothing to give on the final lap. You saw the Escort there come breezing past. once your tyres get to that 80-90% tyre wear, you're not going to be able to take any speed at the front, and it was the MX-5 that would go on to take victory. The Cup car actually fought back on the final lap, would get past, I think the BRZ made a little bit of a mistake, would get back past the Subaru, and amazingly, that MX-5 Cup car would complete the race without having a stop, but it wasn't the fastest way to do it, and he completed the race, I think about 97% tyre wear or something, so yeah, it was a bit touch and go for the Cup car. He did make it home in third though, so that's quite impressive. Yeah, that Cup car was really bloody good on its tyres. I tried to build one, an MX-5 Cup car. It never worked for me, so I don't know how on earth he did it. The tyre strategy race was rather fascinating. In all honesty, what you do with the drag tyres and how you try and keep them alive. Can you even keep them alive for the course of an entire race? It was a lot of fun. There was a lot more to think about it, a lot more to think about during the race than there is normally. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. There is definitely a knack to building cars for this that I haven't quite got. The Dino was pretty good, but yeah, it wasn't as good on its tyres as some of the other vehicles. But I do highly recommend that you give it a go. It is a lot of fun racing like this. It just gives you a little bit more to think about, a little bit more strategic stuff going on, if you like. Anyway, that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.